Welcome to The Explainer. I am so glad you're here today. We are jumping right into an investigation that is part environmental mystery, part legal thriller, and honestly, absolutely crucial to the survival of our natural world. We're looking at the state of Britain's waterways, diving deep into the UK sewage scandal. We are going to conduct a micro to macro autopsy of exactly how an entire system broke down, tracing the threads from individual, heartbreaking human tragedies all the way up to the highest levels of government regulation. Okay, let's get into it.
So at first glance, these might just seem like a totally random assortment of forgotten places, right? An empty swimming pool, a neglected sports hall in Oxfordshire, some old Cold War bunkers, maybe a semi-ruined country house in Lincolnshire. Well, these are actually real directory listings from a location scouting company called Amazing Space. You see, film crews and photographers specifically hunt for and prize these derelict locations for their strange, haunting atmosphere of suspense, loneliness, and pure neglect. They are literal, physical representations of abandonment.
Which brings us to a rather chilling question, and it's really the core of today's explainer. Are Britain's vital waterways being allowed to become just as derelict and neglected as those abandoned buildings? I mean, it's one thing for an old Cold War bunker to fall into disrepair, but we are pivoting here from aesthetic architectural decay to life-threatening environmental neglect. Our rivers and coastlines aren't just pretty scenery for a movie shoot. They are vital, living ecosystems.
Section 1. The Tragic Human Cost. The Dulwich Warren Incident.
To truly grasp the scale of this crisis, we can't just look at spreadsheets and data. We have to zoom right in to the microscopic human level. And this brings us to the devastating facts surrounding 8-year-old Heather Preen. She was on a family holiday in Dulwich Warren, Devon, back in 1999. Now, they specifically chose this beach because of its blue flag status, which is supposedly an award guaranteeing high water quality. But while there, Heather slipped into a putrid pool of water right next to a sewage outlet. In the days that followed, she suffered rapid deterioration, explosive illness, and was eventually placed on a ventilator. Tests came back positive for a severe strain called E. coli 0157. Her brain tragically lost its ability to control her vital organs, and she passed away. Following her death, a really stark divide in narratives emerged. On the one side, you had campaigners in the family pointing out that the Environment Agency, or the EA, had actually received at least 14 complaints about sewage on that specific beach prior to their visit. They alleged that toilet paper was visibly floating in the water, and they noted that the EA's official tests were conducted a full month after Heather's exposure. Now, on the other side, we have the official inquest and Southwest Water's findings. The jury returned a verdict of death by misadventure. Officials pointed out that E. coli 0157 is commonly carried by animals, like cattle and dogs, and Southwest Water maintained that over 100 environmental samples were taken, and ultimately no definitive link was found between the illness and storm overflow activity.
Section 2. Uncovering Dirty Business. The Grassroots Investigation.
These deeply personal tragedies sparked a much wider grassroots movement to uncover what were actually systemic issues. Enter two neighbors in the Cotswolds, a former police detective named Ash Smith and a retired computational biology professor named Peter Hammond. They started noticing that their local river Windrush was losing its biodiversity and literally changing color. What they ultimately helped drag into the light was, frankly, staggering. Nearly 1 million sewage dumps occurred in the UK in 2024 alone. To put that into perspective, that equates to one raw sewage dump every 30 seconds. Now, water companies are legally permitted to release waste into rivers and seas during exceptionally heavy rainfall, basically to stop sewage backing up into people's homes. But the data revealed this was happening year-round, even when there hadn't been a drop of rain. So how exactly did two everyday citizens prove this? Well, it's a brilliant example of cross-disciplinary thinking. You see, Professor Hammond had spent 20 years at the Institute of Child Health, specializing in artificial intelligence and 3D facial recognition. So he took these massive, incredibly shoddy data sets provided by the water companies and repurposed his AI. He basically realized that the way sewage flows is essentially a 2D curve, much like a human facial profile. He transformed that messy flow data into 3D ribbons and ran his sophisticated algorithms right over it. And this proved definitively that these constant dry weather sewage dumps weren't just weather-related accidents. They were deliberate operational policy.
Section 3. Corporate Performance Plummets. Profit versus Infrastructure. All right, zooming out to the macro level, we have the data proving the dumps. But how are the corporations themselves officially performing on paper? According to the latest Environment Agency star ratings for 2024 to 2025, it is the lowest rating the industry has received since 2011. Now, it's worth noting that failure is not inevitable here. Severn Trent Water actually achieved the highest possible industry-leading rating of 4 stars, having completed something like 580 environmental improvement schemes. But they are totally the exception. The vast majority of water companies receive just 2 stars, meaning they require improvement. And Thames Water received the absolute lowest rating of 1 star, which is officially considered poor performance.
The consequences of this underperformance are severe. We're talking about serious water pollution incidents jumping by 60% in 2024 compared to 2023. And remarkably, just 3 companies, Thames Water, Southern Water, and Yorkshire Water, were responsible for over 80% of those catastrophic environmental events.
Now, campaigners argue that this whole situation isn't just about aging pipes rusting away underground. It's about a financial model. The argument is that the profit motive has completely superseded the basic public service of providing clean water. Just look at the economics for a second. $80 billion has been transferred to shareholders, while the water companies themselves are currently sitting on $70 billion in debt. Meanwhile, due to their repeated failings, the regulator Ofwat has required companies to return $700 million to consumers over the last 5 years in the form of underperformance payments. Basically, the infrastructure was starved of investment while the payouts just kept coming.
Section 4. The Regulatory Failure. The Office for Environmental Protection Report.
So, you're probably wondering, if the companies were breaking the law and failing the public this badly, where on earth were the watchdogs? How did official regulators allow this to happen for over a decade? Well, enter the OEP, the Office for Environmental Protection. In December 2025, they released a truly damning comprehensive investigation report. This report audited the 3 main pillars of water regulation in England: DEFRA, which is the government department, Ofwat, the economic regulator, and the Environment Agency. To really get what the OEP found, we need a quick crash course on the law, specifically a 2012 ruling by the Court of Justice of the European Union. This ruling created a very strict 2-stage test for when combined sewer overflows, or CSOs, are legally allowed to discharge. Step 1, it absolutely must be an exceptional circumstance, like unusually heavy rainfall. Step 2, even if it is exceptional, they must use a cost-benefit analysis known by the rather clunky acronym BTKNEEC, Best Technical Knowledge Not Entailing Excessive Costs. Basically, that determines if preventing the discharge is disproportionately expensive. It's a very clear 2-step legal standard.
But here's the kicker. The OEP found massive, systemic failures across all 3 of these regulatory bodies to actually enforce this 2012 law. First, DEFRA failed to update its old 1997 guidance to reflect the new strict law, basically leaving regulators and companies in the dark. Then, the Environment Agency used overly lenient spill thresholds in their framework and totally failed to update the actual permits for the water companies. And finally, Ofwat completely misunderstood its legal duty. They essentially ignored evidence of illegal discharges until 2022, treating mere compliance with an outdated Environment Agency permit as if it were full legal compliance.
The OEP report actually mapped out this complex web of interactions. You have DEFRA setting the policy, the EA monitoring and permitting, Ofwat controlling the financing, and the water and sewage companies carrying out the operations. And what they found was that every single arrow of oversight essentially broke down. The regulators were operating on outdated guidance, misinterpreting the law, and failing to coordinate. And this created a massive, system-wide loophole that allowed companies to continuously dump untreated sewage with zero financial or legal repercussions.
Section 5. Turning the tide. Forcing accountability.
Okay, so we've seen the micro-tragedies, and we've gone through the macro-systemic failures. But what is actually happening right now to fix this broken system? Well, the OEP's investigation has forced some immediate, concrete actions. In September 2025, a new Memorandum of Understanding was signed between DEFRA, the EA, and Ofwat, strictly codifying their coordination and regulatory responsibilities. The EA has launched a massive permit review plan, finally embedding those strict 2012 spill triggers into law. Ofwat has updated its enforcement approach and is actively investigating water companies as we speak. And on the consumer side, while residential customers can't switch, business consumers are leveraging the open water market to switch their water retailers. They're demanding better environmental practices and hitting underperformers right where it hurts, their bottom line.
Wow, we have covered a lot of ground today, right? From a tragic death on a Devon beach to complex AI data mapping, all the way up to European court rulings. But I want to leave you with a really powerful thought, inspired by actor Tom McKay, who actually played Heather Preen's father in a recent dramatization of these events. When water, literally our most vital resource, is commodified, how do we balance the thirst for profit with our fundamental need to survive? The data's out there. The regulators are finally on notice. But the ultimate oversight belongs to us. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Until next time, keep asking the hard questions.